Hello, thanks for watching this video. I figured with this particular game, when you're playing through it, because it's a choose-your-own-adventure style, it's hard to get the big picture of what's going on and what might be happening that you're not experiencing in this playthrough. So I'm going to record myself playing through the game and also talk about some of the big picture stuff. The learning outcomes of this game are to be able to identify the organizing principles of different knowledge practices in conversation, and to use communication strategies that align with different organizing principles in order to more effectively find common ground with diverse audiences. I know that's a lot. This game is, in simple words, about getting other people to agree with you, particularly about science and climate change and stuff like that, by figuring out what makes them feel like knowledge is true, and then altering your language so that what you say feels true to them. And to do that, I use something called legitimation code theory, which isn't, like a philosophy or a big theory of how people work. It's basically about being able to classify different statements, different claims that people make according to some different qualities. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Again, as I said, this is a choose-your-own-adventure style game built in Twine. It starts off with an introduction where you get to make some choices to set up the character. It introduces the narrative and the conflict. And then it branches out here, and you have 3 ducks that you are trying to convince to no longer wear particular scarves that have negative consequences. And for each duck, you can convince them or not convince them in a few different ways, and that'll lead to different endings. Alright, now let's get started playing through. Here's the introduction sequence. You can see there are placeholder graphics right here. They're not mine. I obviously didn't create the ones with the watermark. I'm planning on making my own graphics for this. I'll probably have 10 to 15 of them, be able to reuse some of them, and they'll be just a little bit customized, right? I'll have different ones implemented based on some player decisions about what they're wearing, because these are fashionable ducks. And here's the conflict being introduced. And we're no longer wearing the scarves, so now you can pick a different design element that'll be implemented on the character throughout. Okay, and now we're at this node here, which branches out. This is how you go talk to the other 3 ducks. This first one here, I have all of them outlined. This is the only one that I've done a really rough first pass of the dialogue. So we're going to go ahead and look at that one. Again, I know I'm going through this quickly, but if you want to take a closer look, please feel free to download the HTML file and open it in your browser. Again, dialogue's really rough. I know. I'm working on it. It's the first draft. But let's play through this one. And what happens the first time you play through is that you try to convince the duck, but you don't have the right words, you don't have the right tools to do so. And you realize that, and you can choose to go try to talk to other ducks and see if that works. Or you can get help. You can go through all the ducks, and it doesn't change anything. So eventually, you decide to get help. And that takes you to the snaily godmother, who, in a conversation with the player, introduces some of these basic concepts about the different organizing principles of knowledge and how they can use that to convince people. And I'll try to make this section as to the point, as brief, and as fun as I can. And once they've done that, the players essentially unlocked new dialogue options. And I'm going to zoom in on the right over here and explain a little more about how I've designed this. Legitimation code theory identifies a number of dimensions on which you can classify someone making a claim about knowledge. For example, one of them is about complexity, a scale of really simple to really complex. An example of a really simple claim is that like recycling is good, right? Good is really simple. The idea of putting something in a can is really simple. Versus on the other side of things, you might have changing the transportation system to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. All of those are very complicated words. Greenhouse gas emissions, you can't hold in your hand. Changing a transportation system is incredibly complicated. So simplicity to complexity. And with each duck, they fall at a different place along this scale. And so the player has to be able to identify where they are and then select a statement that aligns with them. So here you have the simple option and the complex option. And you have to do this through a number of different dimensions of knowledge. And at the end, you've either succeeded or failed to convince the duck. And that's pretty much that, right? Like once you've talked to the duck, you can't have the same conversation with them again, and that's coded as either a success or a failure. And then you have to talk to all the ducks, and yeah, the dialogue here isn't fleshed out. Okay, and there's a little surprise here related to the educational component that I won't touch on now. I want you to stumble on your own if you ever play it in the final version. But once you've talked to all 3 ducks, you can try to talk to Smith again, see if you can get him to listen to you. But then you have to call it a day if you can't talk to anyone else. And you get a different ending depending on how many ducks you're able to convince, anywhere from 0 to 3. And there will be a little narrative about what's going on, and I'm imagining that the narrative will be different depending on which ducks you manage to convince, and you'll get a little blurb about what each one's doing. And that's the game. That's the playthrough. So, thank you.